My name is Carrie J. Allen, and I am 34 years old. The way it started was so casual that it took me a second to understand how deeply cruel it was. We were at my sister Madison's wedding, standing just outside the reception area where the tables were already set and glowing under soft lights. The ceremony itself had been beautiful in that curated way Madison always favored. An open-air garden, a string quartet playing something delicate and expensive, imported roses everywhere, and a crystal chandelier suspended from a tree like it belonged there. Everything looked perfect, polished, intentional. Madison looked stunning. Her kids looked like they'd stepped out of a catalog. Bow ties, straight, hair slicked neatly, matching shoes. I was genuinely happy for her. I wanted the day to go smoothly. I wanted her to have everything she'd dreamed of. Liam, my 6-year-old, was holding a small toy car in one hand and the hem of my dress in the other. He wasn't being loud. He was excited, asking when we'd get to sit down and eat, whispering questions the way kids do when they're trying to behave. I spotted the main table where our parents and Madison's children were already seated and started guiding him toward it. That's when Madison intercepted us. She smiled, but not the warm, glowing smile you expect from a bride. This was the tight, knowing smile I remembered from childhood, the one she used when she enjoyed delivering a quiet cut. She glanced down at Liam, then back at me. "Your son's too loud for the main table," she said. "Mine are already seated." And then she turned away, just like that, already moving on to her next obligation. For a moment, I stood there frozen, the words replaying in my head as I tried to make sense of them. I looked back at the table and saw the place cards clearly. Madison's children, beside our parents, front and center. And then I noticed where Liam and I were apparently meant to sit. A fold-out table near the DJ booth. No tablecloth, no place settings. Half shoved against the wall, the kind of table reserved for staff or vendors, practically in the hallway. Liam didn't say anything. He just stared at the other kids laughing and tearing apart bread rolls. I didn't argue. I didn't confront Madison. I didn't make a scene. I took my son's hand and walked out. We left before dinner was served, before the cake, before a single photo. I placed the wedding gift on the table by the exit, a clean envelope with $500 inside. I knew, in Madison's world, that would be seen as an insult. I didn't care, because I had already paid for something far more generous. For months, I had been quietly funding a 5-day ski trip in Aspen for the entire family. First-class flights, the best cabin available, lift passes, rentals, everything. Madison had been dropping hints about it constantly. My parents were in. Madison had already bought new gear, and of course, they all knew I was paying. That night, after Liam fell asleep, I sat on my bed staring at the reservation email. $12,000, non-refundable. I hovered over the cancel button for less than a second. Then I clicked. 2 days passed in silence. Then Madison messaged me. "When do we leave?" I replied with one sentence. "We're not. Trip's canceled." No emojis, no explanation, just the truth. She didn't respond right away. Then came the missed calls. Hers first, then our mother, then our father, then her new husband. I didn't answer a single one. I wasn't angry. I was done. And that was only the beginning. The silence after I canceled the trip didn't even last a full day. It never does with Madison. She doesn't sit with discomfort. She broadcasts it until someone else fixes it for her. By the next morning, my phone was buzzing nonstop on the counter while I made Liam breakfast, letting him drown his waffles in syrup because suddenly the small things mattered more than managing adult tantrums. At 8:07 a.m., the family group chat lit up. Family trip. I had made the chat months earlier, back when the snowflake emoji felt hopeful instead of ironic. Madison was the first to speak. "Wow, all this because you didn't like your table?" I didn't respond. I cut strawberries into careful slices and reminded Liam to chew with his mouth closed. She tried again a few minutes later, sharper this time. "Not to sound ungrateful, but I honestly didn't expect just $500 from you. You knew we were short for the honeymoon spa. Thought you had it covered." I stared at the screen long enough to feel something settle in my chest. $500. That's what she reduced it to. The only gift anyone could see. The only thing she could quantify in front of others. Not the ski trip, not the months of support, not the quiet transfers I'd never announced. My mom jumped in quickly, always eager to smooth things over. "Carrie, I think you misunderstood the seating. Madison said she just didn't want the kids getting overstimulated." Overstimulated. That word echoed in my head. Her kids had tablets, bread baskets, and prime seating. Mine had been parked behind a speaker like an inconvenience to be hidden. Then my dad chimed in. "This is ridiculous. You're upsetting everyone. Don't let something this minor ruin everything." That's when it clicked. They weren't asking me to explain how I felt. They were asking me to return to my role, the reasonable one, the mature one, the one who fixes the mood and absorbs the cost so everyone else can enjoy themselves. I had always been good at that. Too good. I didn't reply in this group chat. Instead, I poured myself coffee and opened my laptop. Not to vent, not to cry, to calculate. Madison's rent, $1,400 a month. I'd been covering it since she got laid off last December. At first, it was temporary. Then it was until Joel's business loan comes through. Then it just became normal. Utilities, $185. Groceries, a standing transfer for the kids' expenses that I hadn't seen a receipt for in months. Cell phone bill, family plan, over $2,000 a month, quietly draining out of my account. By the time the group chat started arguing again, I was already on the phone with my bank, canceling the automatic transfers. No announcement, no warning, just clicks and confirmations. At 6:42 p.m., Madison sent one last message. "So you're really going to ruin Aspen for all of us over one petty moment?" I didn't answer, but I did log into the airline account and cancel her flight too. The snowflake emoji finally meant what it should have all along. The next morning, I knew someone would show up. Madison never sends herself when she wants control. She sends reinforcements. At 7:42 a.m., the pounding started. Not a polite knock, the kind that demands to be answered. Liam was half asleep on the couch, cereal bowl balanced on his knees, remote in his hand. I checked the peephole. My mom. Her minivan parked crookedly across the driveway, half blocking the trash bins like she'd come in a hurry. I opened the door but didn't step aside. She brushed past me anyway, heading straight for the kitchen, like muscle memory was permission. "You're blowing this way out of proportion," she said, already talking before I'd closed the door. I leaned against the counter and let her go. She listed excuses like bullet points. "Madison didn't mean to hurt your feelings. Weddings are chaotic. You could have pulled her aside. Instead, you punished everyone and embarrassed her." "Did you know I was paying her rent?" I asked quietly. She stopped talking, looked down at her purse strap, finally nodded. She said it was temporary. "Did you know it's been 10 months? Silence again. I told her I'd already contacted the leasing office. I was off the contract. January was on Madison. Utilities, groceries, kids' expenses, all of it was done. She called me financially vindictive, said I was choosing money over family. I asked if she knew Madison had expected me to pay for the honeymoon spa package too. She sighed and said the sentence that cracked everything open. "She's under a lot of pressure, and you make good money. You've always been the one who could afford to help." That's when I realized this wasn't entitlement, it was agreement. They had all decided who I was years ago, the one who could absorb it, the one who didn't complain, the one who paid so no one else had to feel uncomfortable. Later that afternoon, Joel messaged me. Calm, polite. He hoped we could move past the misunderstanding and still do the trip. Said Madison had been crying, said it was supposed to be a celebration. I didn't reply. Joel was always the peacekeeper, the guy who stayed neutral while chaos rearranged itself around him. Neutrality had never saved anyone in my family. It just protected Madison longer. By that evening, the group chat was a mess. Please. Accusations. Can we please talk? This isn't worth destroying your relationship. And then Madison's line, the one that sat like a brick in my chest. "So now you're cutting me off after everything I've done for you." Everything she'd done for me. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. 3 days after the wedding, her rent was due. At 6:12 a.m., I got a text from her landlord. Polite, brief. "We've been unable to reach Madison regarding rent. Please advise." I forwarded it to Madison with 5 words. "Not my responsibility. Good luck." 13 minutes later, the meltdown started. It took exactly 13 minutes for Madison to respond after I forwarded the landlord's message. First came a voice memo I didn't listen to, then a flood of texts, each one more frantic than the last. She accused me of being abusive, of endangering her children, of punishing her for something so small. She said Joel was waiting on a client payment. She said the timing was bad. Then she delivered the line she must have believed would snap me back into place. "If we get evicted, that's on you." I stared at my phone. stunned by how sincerely she believed that my refusal to keep paying for her life somehow made me responsible for its collapse. I didn't reply. I put my phone face down and took Liam to school like any other morning. Because the thing about breaking patterns is that the world doesn't end when you do it. It just keeps moving. I wasn't expecting Joel to show up next. It was late afternoon when my receptionist buzzed my office. "There's a man here asking for you. He says it's urgent. His name is Joel." I almost told her to send him away. Almost. Curiosity won. When he walked in, he looked tired in a way I'd never seen before. Not wedding tired, not new husband tired, bone tired. He was holding a paper bag from a trendy bakery near their apartment like a peace offering. He sat down without touching the coffee I offered. "Madison's struggling," he said quietly. "I think she thought you'd come around by now." I didn't say anything. I let the silence do the work. "She didn't mean to hurt you," he continued. "You know how she gets. Things spiral. She doesn't always know how to stop." That was familiar. I had heard that sentence my entire life, just with different delivery. What changed was what he said next. "She's scared," he admitted. "Not of you. She's scared of what it looks like when you're really done." That landed differently. This wasn't manipulation. This was fear. Real fear. The kind that comes when someone realizes the safety net they never acknowledged is gone. I asked him one question. "What are you going to do when she runs out of people to blame?" He didn't answer right away. He looked down at his hands, then finally said, "I don't think I can keep fixing this for her. I'm not built for it." That was the first moment I felt something like respect for him. Not because he was perfect, but because he was finally seeing the reality I'd been living in for years. He left the pastries on my desk and walked out without asking me to change my mind. That night, the group chat went eerily silent. No guilt, no outrage, no demands. It was as if someone had finally told Madison the truth, and she didn't know what to do with it. At 9:30 p.m., my dad broke the silence with a message. "I think we need to meet in person, the whole family." I read it once, then again, and felt nothing. There wasn't going to be a family meeting. No intervention. No apologies wrapped in excuses. I was done negotiating my worth. Instead, I booked a trip. Not Aspen, not snow, not cabins or forced togetherness. Just me and Liam. Somewhere warm, somewhere quiet, somewhere we could swim and eat and laugh without being told we were too loud for the table. I didn't tell anyone we were going because for the first time in years, I wasn't trying to include everyone. The shift came quietly after that. Madison stopped texting for a while. Maybe Joel told her how the conversation went. Maybe she thought silence would scare me into reaching out first. It didn't. Instead, she moved to Instagram, her favorite stage. Grainy photos of her kids bundled in coats indoors. A candle next to a cardboard box captioned, "Packing again." A shot of her living room stripped down to a throw pillow and no context. Some people don't know what loyalty means. The comments poured in. "Sending love. You're so strong. What happened? Thought you and your sister were close." She never answered publicly, but she didn't have to. She was working the story behind the scenes. I know because 3 acquaintances messaged me the next day, awkwardly asking if everything was okay. I wasn't angry. I wasn't defensive. I was done being hungry for approval. What she didn't post was how she hadn't applied for a job in 6 months, how she had no savings, how every part of her life was still tethered to me in ways I hadn't fully untangled yet. So I sat down and finished the job. Costco membership, Amazon Prime, school lunch accounts, phone plan, streaming services, gym membership, dental insurance I'd added for her kids after a tearful phone call about fillings. I removed her from all of it. That evening she called, not to argue, not to accuse, to beg. She said they were 2 weeks behind on rent, that the gas company was threatening shutoff, that her kids had never lived in a place without Christmas lights before. I listened without interrupting. When she finally stopped, I asked her the only question that mattered. "Did you ever plan to take care of yourself?" She answered honestly, "I didn't think I'd have to." That was the truth beneath everything. Not confusion, not desperation, assumption. The next morning, a neighbor sent me a photo of an eviction notice taped to Madison's door. Final notice. Vacate by the end of the month. I didn't respond. Not to the neighbor, not to Madison, not to my parents. When Madison posted a photo of her empty apartment with the caption, "Sometimes you have to start over with nothing," I didn't like it. I didn't comment. Starting over wasn't something being done to her. It was something she should have done years ago. And I was no longer standing in the way. After the eviction notice went up, something strange happened. The noise stopped. No frantic calls, no dramatic texts, no new group chats lighting up with demands that I explain myself. It was the quiet that comes when a performance has ended and the audience has gone home. For a few days, I wondered if Madison had finally understood, if losing the apartment had shaken her into some version of clarity. I didn't hope for an apology. I didn't need one. I just wondered if the cycle had finally broken. Then the email arrived. Not a text, not a call. An email, carefully written, carefully timed, sent on a quiet Sunday morning while Liam was building a Lego spaceship at the kitchen table. The subject line was simple and nauseating all at once. Peace. There was no greeting. No hello, no how are you. No mention of the months of chaos she'd unleashed. Just paragraphs that sounded reflective without actually reflecting on anything. She wrote that she was still hurt, but she understood my decision. She said she was in a better emotional place now, that she'd started blogging to process everything. And then, almost casually, she added that she hoped I wouldn't be upset if some of what she wrote overlapped with our shared history. That was the warning. She wasn't reaching out to mend anything. She was asking for permission to rewrite it. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the humiliation at the wedding, no mention of the money, no accountability for the rent, the eviction, the manipulation. Just a soft announcement that she would be telling her version of events publicly, dressed in pastel filters, and quotes about resilience. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I finally understood something that had taken me years to accept. Madison didn't want reconciliation. She wanted narrative control, and the only way to deny her that was to stop participating altogether. So I did something else. I booked another trip. Not Aspen, not snow, not anything that came with expectations or shared tables or forced smiles. This one was just me and Liam. Arizona. A small cabin near Sedona that smelled like cedar and dust and quiet. No TV, no itinerary. Just mornings that started when we woke up and ended when the stars came out. We hiked. We fed alpacas at a little ranch that Liam still talks about. We ate outside and laughed too loudly and didn't apologize to anyone for it. One night, sitting on the porch wrapped in blankets, Liam asked me why we never did trips like this before. I told him the truth, because we were always dragging everyone else with us. When we got back, I finished detaching in ways that felt mundane but were anything but. I took myself off the family phone plan. I blocked the group chat. I created new accounts for the things that mattered to us and closed the ones that tied me to obligations I'd never agreed to. Every click felt like cutting a thread that had been quietly strangling me. My mom texted me in early December, confused. "Did you change your number?" I hadn't. She sent another message later, longer this time, the kind she always sends when she's trying to sound reasonable. Families go through hard times. Madison's been humbled. She's starting over. You've made your point. Now it's time to forgive and come together. I read it once and didn't respond. I hadn't made a point. I'd made a decision. Madison's blog went live a week later. The first post that hinted at me was titled, "When Your Sister Turns Her Back, But You Heal Anyway." There were no fake names, no disguises. She painted herself as brave, wounded, abandoned. She wrote about how she used to lean on her sister until she learned to stand alone. Except her version of standing alone still involved Joel working 2 jobs, and my parents quietly pitching in when they'd sworn they couldn't afford to help. I let it all go. The lies, the comments, the messages that trickled in from people who only knew her version. I didn't correct them. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. Because explaining would have meant I still cared what they thought. In the quiet that followed, something unexpected happened. I felt light, not relieved. Light, like I'd been carrying weight for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to set it down. Liam slept better. He laughed more. One night, curled up on the couch watching a movie, he said, "I like it when it's just us." And I realized that in trying to keep the peace for years, I'd almost taught him that being small was safer than being seen. By Christmas, I wasn't checking for invitations. I didn't wonder what Madison's kids got or whether Joel was still delivering food at night. I didn't care what her blog said because her story wasn't mine to carry anymore. I hadn't lost a family. I had stepped out of a transaction, And for the first time in my adult life, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. The last thing that broke was not loud. There was no final argument, no slammed door, no dramatic message that forced a response. What broke was the expectation. The assumption that I would eventually fold, soften, forgive, resume payments, show up with gifts and smiles and solutions. When that didn't happen, when weeks passed and then months, something shifted in the background like a stage being dismantled after a show that never reopened. My parents stopped calling first. They didn't say they were done. They just slowed. Messages became shorter, then rarer. Holidays came and went with polite texts that felt more like obligation than invitation. Madison stopped tagging me online. She didn't stop writing, didn't stop posting, but she stopped saying my name. I wasn't useful to her narrative anymore. I had gone quiet in a way she couldn't weaponize. And that's when I understood it had never been about love. It had been about access. Access to my money, my time, my emotional labor. Access to the version of me who always said yes because saying no felt cruel. The version of me who smoothed things over so everyone else could stay comfortable. The sister who paid rent, covered groceries, booked trips, and swallowed disrespect because it was easier than being the problem. When I stepped out of that role, the structure collapsed. Not because I destroyed it, but because it couldn't stand without me holding it up. Liam noticed the change before I did. He stopped asking why we didn't see Aunt Madison anymore. He stopped bracing when family came up in conversation. He started inviting friends over without checking my face first, started laughing louder, started taking up space in a way I hadn't realized he'd been shrinking before. One night, he asked me if we could make our own traditions instead of always going to someone else's house. I said yes, without hesitation. We did. We baked cookies on random Wednesdays. We ate dinner on the couch and didn't apologize for crumbs. We went on small trips that didn't require permission or planning committees. I stopped budgeting around emergencies that weren't mine. I stopped checking my phone with dread. Once, months later, I ran into Joel at the grocery store. He looked older, tired. We exchanged a polite nod. He didn't ask how I was. I didn't ask how Madison was. We both knew that anything we said would only reopen doors neither of us wanted to walk through again. That was enough. I never confronted Madison about the blog. I never corrected the story she told. People who mattered to me eventually saw through it. People who didn't were never going to. I learned that truth doesn't need defending when you stop handing out invitations to doubt it. On the anniversary of the wedding, the one where my son was deemed too loud for the table, I took Liam out for ice cream. We sat on a bench downtown, sticky fingers and all, watching people pass by. He asked me why I smiled when I looked sad sometimes. I told him that sadness doesn't mean something is wrong. Sometimes it just means something important changed. He thought about that for a moment, then nodded like it made sense. That night, after he fell asleep, I scrolled through my phone and deleted the last shared album, the last thread tying me to a version of family that only existed when I was paying for it. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. I didn't lose a sister. I lost the expectation that love should hurt. I didn't lose parents. I lost the obligation to keep proving my worth. And in exchange, I gained something I didn't know I was allowed to have. Peace without explanation. My name is Carrie J. Allen, and walking away wasn't the end of my family story. It was the beginning of my own.